Hi, thank you so much for joining. Maybe you can start with quickly say your name, what you're doing right now, and where were you professionally before the Global Immersion Framework program?
Yeah. So my name is Dom, and I guess I can say now in postgraduate. I did the Sudansu's course, Designing Imaginative Business Models, and was a part of the Indian immersion. And I graduated from my master's a year ago, and now I'm working as a global people analytics and projects coordinator, mainly within social impact projects.
What did you expect before starting the program?
Yeah, so it's so I actually I found my essay that I wrote about the immersion because I almost had to jog my memory a little bit. And yeah, it's crazy that it's been so much time since it's passed. But upon reflection, I think when I signed up for it, I was initially just pulled in by the prospect of going to a different country and being able to practically work in the real world and gain some proper experience. But I think what really just exceeded my expectations is that it was so much more than that. It was really about a journey of self development and so much personal growth, and also understanding that although we were out there to solve problems and embed ourselves in a different context, a lot of it was about our personal journey and how we interacted in these different environments. So it was a huge personal journey, and I think that was what was really exciting. And knowing that we thought that we would be a bit removed, we would go to India and work with a team and solve a problem. And often as researchers, we're taught in school to kind of separate yourself from the problem field. Like, don't bring your personality or your bias or anything in it. But I think being in that context, that was so different, and all the frameworks we had didn't really work, and we were facing a lot of resistance. We realized that we are a part of the problem. We're in this environment together. So I think it was a lot of not removing yourself, but bringing yourself into the problem. So that was my greatest takeaway, at least from this immersive experience.
What surprised you or challenged your assumption during the experience? If you have some concrete examples.
I guess the biggest challenge I faced during the immersion was I think we went in with a preconceived notion of we're going to have a problem field, we're going to be in a new environment, we know that it's going to be different, but I kind of just expected that there was going to be more clarity in the the problem scoping, or what we were looking to solve. And I think it's such a reflection of the real world, because every experience we'd had before that in school, you get given a case study, or you get given a lot of information about what you're going to solve. And when we arrived there was a lot of frustration in the beginning of, why aren't people telling us what to solve? Why don't people know? I mean, we've come all the way to India. Surely there's a bit more structure in what they want us to help with, or what we should do. And I think that was my first like taste of medicine in the real world, is everyone's figuring things out as they go, and we don't know what the problems of tomorrow will be. And kind of going in with a preconceived notion of, I can use my, I don't know, my school knowledge and all these things to solve a problem, but we didn't even know where to begin. We didn't have a scope of how to even apply what we knew. And I think kind of going through that friction, and working through a very unsanitized environment that we're just not used to from school, was really, I think, quite a difficult experience for all of us. But the greatest learning of that is real life. And that is the difference between kind of university learning versus when you get out in the real world.
Is there any
Yeah.
particular moment that stayed with you after the program ended?
Oh, for sure. I think when the program ended, and then obviously doing our master thesis and then graduating, it's been such a skill that you have to continuously work on. And I've seen it in other spheres of learning after school with different frameworks. Like, awareness, pause, reframe, all these very like other different models of essentially looking at the same thing, being embedded and being aware of your environment and breaking your boundedness and what are your assumptions. And I think what's stuck with me, but it's so difficult to still master, but it's what I take with me always is when you're in the midst of an experience, it's really hard to observe it when you're in it. So, like, for example, now when you're in the working world, if you are dealing with a difficult colleague or you're dealing with a complex problem and there's friction and there's uncertainty and there's complexity, and it's when you're in that friction of a moment, it takes, I think, a lot of consistently really working on it to bring yourself into that like awareness or reflection. Because I don't know, at least for me personally, what I got out of the immersion is that I often am the person that can sometimes jump to a conclusion because I'm in such a rush to like solve something. And maybe I'm not actually taking a step back and being fully aware of my problem and what's going on and acting in a different way. And I think that is the kind of the lifelong skill of the immersion is when you go to a different place and you're not used to your own familiar contexts and whatnot, you're kind of forced to be reflective because your dominant logic doesn't really work here. There's different playing fields. And then the real learning is like, then you have that experience of, oh, I actually have to take a step back and reflect and be aware of the full scope. And now kind of like coming back to Europe and being in your similar environment, the learning, like the stop, because now you go into the working field. And I mean, you're constantly dealing with people's different prides to their knowledge, different problems, not seeing eye to eye on things, and being able to really have that skill of being embedded in the context and being able to communicate that with different people is such a life skill. Yeah, I still continue to actively bring that with me in my professional life, but it is very difficult when you're in the heat of an experience to be aware of it. And that's why you kind of have to consistently keep working on it.
From all the moments, is there any particular part of the program that inspires you?
I mean, for sure, so many things. I think like a culmination of things. I mean, the whole process of this immersion is kind of the skill set that I have today. Just the way that they have organized this process of, you know, initially preparing through play and through theory, and then being brought into the context, and then coming back home and seeing what have I learned from this experience. That whole process of learning is something that I bring into my working life and more like my way of thinking now in the real world. And I think even now being in the corporate world, I really try and iterate these learnings even with senior leaders or colleagues or whatnot, because even now when I have to problem solve or when there's disagreement, and I mean, a lot of working life is things having personality clashes and different perspectives, even though we're in the same company. And I think that process of how I learned through immersion and just taking a step back, and how I communicate myself to someone and how I bring people in to break down a problem is what I bring into work still on a very regular basis. And so I really bring that kind of process thinking into when we have to tackle a lot of complexity at work and we have a lot of stakeholders involved. And yeah, we kind of have to build blocks together and do it in a very nurturing.
What would be the skills a person should possess before going to this program?
I personally don't think this program is for everyone. I think it is for many people, but I would say the crux of this program is really a reflection of your learning and your personal development and your openness to the learning journey. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of challenging your own assumptions and why do I have the knowledge that I have and why do I think this is a truth, and a lot of self-reflection and in that regard. So I think this program is most suitable for people that really have an open mind, because I think the value that you gain out of this is exponential if you are able to question yourself and question your train of thought, question your beliefs, question yourself, be critical, and be open-minded to reflection and new learnings. So definitely centered towards people that have a propensity to learn, a willingness to learn, a willingness to be critical and be reflective and be open.
Do you have a one-liner, a sentence that could explain the global immersion framework, if you can encapsulate that?
A journey of finding certainty in complexity would be one thing. A journey of self reflection, self development, and breaking your own boundedness.